Thank you.
I'd like to turn things over to Bill and Tanya.
Well, thank you. That's a very nice introduction.
And first of all, I am so grateful to Bill Boggs for coming in at the last minute.
Hey, free lunch, come on.
Gracious. Ladies and gentlemen, if you ever have free lunch, this is Bill Boggs.
Oh, thank you. Actually, one tactical note. Tanya mentioned the lights are...
Is it possible? I'd love to
possible
see some
lower them
pictures
about
here.
15%, just because I think they're hurting our eyes. Anyway, shall we go
I'd like
ahead?
to, if I may, I would like to introduce three people. First, my cousin and very dear friend, Tania Grossinger.
In person.
Who my partner in mischief and mayhem growing up at Grossinger's. And if I hadn't written the book, she probably would have. I'd also like to give a shout out to Jennifer McCartney. Jennifer is the senior editor at Skyhorse Publishing, and she's going to be my editor, for which I am very honored and grateful. And last and definitely not least, Bill Wolfsaw, who is the associate publisher, vice president in charge of marketing and sales, and has become a dear friend at Skyhorse. And Bill, I think you wanted to have say a few words.
I just wanted to let everyone know that Skyhorse is terribly proud to have brought back Growing Up at Grossinger's. Bringing back old, lovely books is something we love to do. But I also wanted to let you know that we've just concluded a 2-book deal for Tanya to do 2 more books for us. One will be Memoirs of an Independent Woman, which will talk about her Grossinger years, but also her business years as a writer and a publicist. And trust me, when you read the section about her 6 years working at the Playboy Club, you'll want to read those. You'll want to read the book. And the second book will be a children's book, her first ever, and it'll be called Jackie and Me. And it'll be about her very special relationship with Jackie Robinson, who she met at Grossinger's, and she'll tell you more about that. But I wanted to thank her for inviting me, and thank you for letting us be part of your life and your publisher.
So should we commence the conversation? All right. Well, first let's talk, obviously we're going to be talking about a unique period in Jewish American history, and we're going to be talking about a unique period in entertainment and a unique period in leisure, though. So as we look at the Catskills in general, let's start with the big picture. What is the era we're talking about? Grossinger's is like the summit of that. Who was your competition? Just describe the era and the other hotels.
The Grossinger's began in 1914 as a small farmhouse. It did not start as a hotel. Pop Grossinger, Jenny Grossinger, who's the namesake, the name most associated with Grossinger's, had a lung problem. It wasn't tuberculosis, but it was something akin to that. And they were told by the doctors that the air in the Catskills was so fresh that it'd be to their advantage to go up there, which they did. And then friends wanted to come up and visit. Things do not change, ladies and gentlemen. And they would come up, and Mom Grossinger, Jenny's mother, would say, well, you have to help milk the cow. Everybody had to work. The first Grossinger guests, incidentally, were the parents of the Krindler family that created the 21 Club. So it's all very incestuous in the business. And Grossingers developed from there. The whole area did not start as a resort hotel area. It started with perhaps some boarding houses, but primarily as a refuge for people who needed fresh air. Grossinger's, and I think the Catskill Mountains as a whole, reached their pinnacle in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s, and then it started to go downhill rather rapidly. At its height, there were 350 some hotels. Now there might be 1 or 2, and I'm not sure about in a second. But I do address that in the book.
It's almost like the end of the big band era. What are the factors that caused the decline?
A number of things. When Grossinger's first started, it was called Grossinger Hotel and Country Club, because it was a time when Jews were not allowed in country clubs, and this was to show that they were permitted here. As we got into the 50s, 60s, there was more assimilation, and there was no need really to say, Jews had their own country clubs of their own, they didn't have to go to a Grossinger's. Also, a stupid word, you had air conditioning. So many people went to the Catskills because it was too hot in the city. Then jet travel, because then it became easier, as a matter of fact, and perhaps even a little bit less expensive to fly to Miami, to Puerto Rico. And instead of the cachet being, let's say most people came to Grossinger's in the summer, at least a great number, from July 4th to Labor Day. They would come in, be greeted, they would ask for Myra the bellhop. They would reserve the bellhop, and they would reserve Sadie the waitress. And good evening, Mrs. Yuckenflush, so happy to see you, and all the little Yuckenflush on. But then what happened is that the cachet turned out to be, how many places have you been in a given period of time? Then you had jet travel, and then you had cruises. Now, everybody, there had been a rumor, of course now it actually might happen, but at the time, that gambling was going to come to the Catskills. I'm going back now 30 years as the Catskills started to decline. Well, I used to say you can take the bet, what is going to come first, gambling or the Messiah, and I wouldn't take that bet. Now it looks as if it is possible the gambling might come in, but don't count the Messiah out. But this is what happened, and it was, well, it was ridiculous. Okay, there was a rumor going around, this is 30 years ago, that if gambling came in, the only way that a resort hotel would be able to build a casino was that they would have to make $10 million in capital improvements. Rumor. So now you would have a hotel, not Grossinger's exactly, but some of the mid-price hotels, and the owner gets up in the morning, the roof is leaking. Got to do something, he calls in the contractor, and Mr. Contractor says it'll cost $2 million. The guy says, well, if I put $2 million now, that's not going to go into my 10 mil that I will need to get a casino license. So he doesn't fix the roof because gambling's going to come in, and metaphorically and literally, the roof caves in. And this happened to an awful lot of hotels. Now in the 60s, you have Women's Lib. They're working for themselves. They don't have to go with mommy and daddy to meet a nice Jewish boy. People become more health conscious. These 8-course, heavily caloric meals are no longer as appealing. The clientele gets older. Now there's a joke actually about two comics meeting at the Friars Club. And one comic says to the other, I just got back from a gig in the Catskills. And comic number 2 says, well, how was the audience? And number 1 comic says, well, there were 2 kinds of people in the audience, the 90-year-olds and their parents. and then television became someone like an Alan King or Milton Berle, who had his own show. He doesn't have to run up to Grossinger's to perform at the Grossinger Playhouse. The performers could be paid more in 4 minutes on Ed Sullivan than probably from July 4th to Labor Day, doubling on every one of the 350 hotels in the Catskills. So they started demanding a lot of money. And the hotels didn't make the money because they didn't have service charges. They didn't have entrance charges. Then they start with conventions. Okay, now we're going to have a lot of conventions, and it changes the audience, it changes the guests, it changes the attitude, it changes the respect for the individual and leisure travel and the family. You have the efficiency experts. They come and they get paid an awful lot of money to say this, that, and the other thing. Then put in a report. Your housekeeping department, you've got to get rid of it. You can't fire Aunt Rose. These are all family-run hotels. And then you finally see that the younger generation wants nothing to do with them. And that was the end of the Catskills.
Well, let's go back to the peak, okay, the pinnacle. Growing up Grossinger's, right? You were, at one point you had to be a student. Where did you do your homework? You lived in a hotel.
I did my homework in what was called the tap room, which was outside of the terrace room where the entertainment was. And I would do my homework where the dance teachers would give a free dance class every day when I got home from school. And so I would be studying American history and hearing the box step to the rumba. Side together forward, side together back. And that's where I did my homework.
All right, that's right. So try to put you, in other words, if Eloise had been Jewish and lived in the mountains, you would have been Eloise. So sort of.
If Eloise had been Jewish, she wouldn't have been in the mountains.
All right, let's talk celebrities, okay?
Celebrities.
The peak, the pinnacle. Who were some of the people who kind of worked the hotel and your relationships with them? And
Well, it's interesting. As many of you probably know, Eddie Fisher worked at Grossinger's. He was supposedly discovered at Grossinger's. He married Debbie Reynolds at Grossinger's.
he was supposed to be discovered by Eddie Cantor, right?
Supposedly.
Supposedly.
And this is where, as a young kid, I turned into the cynical adult that I am now. Yes, there was a gentleman by the name of Milton Blackstone, and he was the public relations genius behind Grossinger's, and Jenny Grossinger. Not a nice man, but he knew his business. And it's because of his efforts that Eddie Fisher was 17 years old. He sang on a radio show in Philadelphia. He was brought to the Copacabana where Monty Proser, who was the the owner, said he needed seasoning. Besides, he was too young to appear in a nightclub. They brought him up to Grossinger's where he was a boat boy. And his only music of the day was at 4 o'clock, all boats in, but he sang it on key. And he would sing warm-up for the house bands before a show, after a show. He seasoned very, very well. And then it occurred to Mr. Blackstone that if he could get Eddie Cantor, who was a friend of Jenny Grossinger and the Grossinger family, to, quote, discover him, then Grossinger's would get its name in the papers. So it was Labor Day of 1949, and I remember my cousin Marianne, myself, all the kids who grew up there, where they didn't really love us to attend Saturday night shows because we were kids, we were noisy. We were supposed to move around, and when he sang, we were supposed to scream and clap. You know, we were pre-Frank Sinatra groupies or post-Frank Sinatra groupies. And then Eddie Cantor got up there and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, if you all agree that Eddie Cantor's, I'm going to take Eddie Fisher with me on a national tour. He'll be on the show." This contract had been signed 3 months before. And everyone clap, clap, yay, 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 and Eddie Fisher became Eddie Fisher. Then he met Debbie Reynolds at, I think, Walter Reed Hospital at one point. They were both entertaining the troops. And he invited her to Grossinger's, and Mr. Blackstone had another idea. They're such a cute couple. They should get married. They should not have gotten married. But I saw Eddie Fisher the day before his wedding. I had come home, I was a student at Brandeis University. I had come home for a 3-day vacation or something, and I bumped into him walking on the baseball field, around in circles, first, second, third, home. And he was one unhappy soul. And we were friends, you know, and I said, "Eddie, what's wrong? You're getting married tomorrow." You know, "I know." And I started to ask him some questions, and he really didn't want to. And I finally said, "Eddie, why are you doing it?" And he answered, as honestly as he could, "Have you ever had know of anybody who's ever said no to Mr. Blackstone?" And that was the beginning of this very happy marriage. I was friendly with him. Rocky Marciano, who was heavyweight, used to train at Grossinger's for his heavyweight championship battles. It always I could never understand how this sweet, kind boxer could be in a ring ready to kill. But that was his job, and he did his job well. One day, on Saturday afternoons, they had what was called a cocktail matinee, where the Latin band would play, but in formal dress. And Rocky comes in, he's standing at the bar with some reporters, and he sees me dancing a merengue with one of the dance teachers. And I see him, and we're dancing close. It's a merengue, for God's sake. And when it's over, he beckons me over. "Who's that guy?" And I said, "It's Gustavo. He's a dance teacher." "You're not supposed to dance so close to him." I said, "He's a dance teacher. He's on the staff. He's a friend. It's the kind of dance you dance close. You want to dance with somebody, you dance with me." I said, "Rocky, you don't know how to dance." Because everyone knew that. He had no rhythm. It was amazing. When he was back, what's that, the boxing bag, the Marianne? He could hit the Marianne, sorry Marianne, nothing personal. He could hit the Marianne like crazy, couldn't move side together forward. I could teach him that side together back. He said, "Meet me next week." My very favorite